Hi everyone and welcome back to the channel. Well, the 1920s were a period of light and darkness for the United States, where economic growth and wealth coexisted with the development of a cunning and growing criminality, both local and foreign, which took advantage of Prohibition to start a process of illegal trafficking that became extremely difficult to eradicate. So it was precisely in this period that Cosa Nostra began to control the obscure areas of the New York territory, and numerous cruel and ambitious characters who made American mafia history began to stand out. Vito Genovese, known as Don Vitone, belongs to this group of mafiosi who committed crimes, started internal wars and established powerful alliances before and during the Second World War. And in this video today, we want to go deep into his life and narrate his role in important events that changed criminality of that time. Vito Genovese was born on November the 27th, 1897, in Resigliano in the municipality of Tufino in the province of Naples. He was still a young boy when in 1912 his family decided to emigrate to America and settle first in Queens and then join relatives in Little Italy. And that's the neighbourhood of Lower Manhattan, inhabited mainly by citizens of Italian origin. Now, by the way, Little Italy is now a cool and expensive and rather trendy part of town, but back then it was of course far less welcoming and a much less glamorous place to live. Vito seems to be attracted by the life on the street, and in a short time he manages to become part of the group of Neapolitan mafiosi who control the area through, as always, threats, violence and provide protection, in of course exchange for money. The power of these camorristi, as you all know the mafia members from Naples being called that, is developed mainly through illegal gambling. 5 years later, after his arrival in America, young Vito is arrested for the first time for illegal possession of a firearm. He'll then spend 2 months in jail. In the meantime, in the USA, some important changes were taking place that will prove to have a real weight on the development of the mafia and on the career of Don Vitone. For a long time, in fact, the Protestant preachers had been demanding action by the authorities to fight against the consumption of alcoholic beverages. And after a positive response from many states, in 1919 the 18th Amendment Act was first approved, and then a federal law which prohibited alcoholic beverages in all the United States came into force. And so started the era of Prohibition that many of us of course are now familiar with, mostly through the movies. Prohibition will last from 1920 to 1933. And will bring with it many negative consequences, such as the exponential increase of alcohol smuggling and illegal traffic managed by mafia families. It was a huge cash cow for anyone ready to take that huge risk involved in transporting liquor. Now, thanks to these Prohibition laws, Vito approached the gang of the gangster Lucky Luciano, and then jointly began to deal with the smuggling of alcohol and drugs and the exploitation of prostitution. Lucky Luciano is a mafioso linked to the US Cosa Nostra, and in particular at the time he's associated with Joe Masseria, a Sicilian boss who is beginning to expand from the Lower East Side to the rest of the city. Genovese and Luciano immediately find a connection, and their friendship will last for over 40 years. Genovese and Luciano followed boss Masseria, a mafioso of Sicilian origin who had come to America in 1903. And had started a fruitful criminal career thanks to the support of boss Giuseppe Morello. Now, thanks to the alliance with Morello and to the work of his best men Luciano and Genovese, Masseria began to expand during the years of Prohibition. And this increase in power was not well viewed by the most powerful mafioso in the area, Salvatore d'Aquila, and by Salvatore Maranzano, a mafioso who had imported into the US the structure and modus operandi of the Sicilian mafia, and who was involved in illegal trafficking in contrast and competition with those of Masseria. So, Masseria acts coldly and has his hitmen kill D'Aquila. But this does not immediately trigger the war. In fact, it's the continuous provocations of Maranzano who does everything possible to hijack his enemies' loads of alcohol, and the murders of the men of both factions that finally lead to the outbreak of the Castellammarese War. Now, this name derives from the fact that the faction of Maranzano was composed mainly of mobsters from Castellammare del Golfo. Masseria was instead associated with many criminals of non-Sicilian origin, including Vito Genovese, called by his opponents contemptuously the Neapolitan. Now, the criminals linked to Masseria were seen by those of Maranzano as dishonourable men because they dealt with the exploitation of prostitution, an activity considered degrading by many mafiosi. It was Vito Genovese himself who started a series of killings by assassinating the boss Gaetano Reina by order of Masseria, who was convinced that Reina was a traitor and had passed to Maranzano's faction. The conflicts went on for about a year and began to negatively affect the illicit traffic of the groups. So at a certain point, Luciano decides to eliminate the problem at its roots. And in order to put an end to the war, he organises the murder of his ally Masseria and assigns this task to Genovese and others of his men. Masseria is then treacherously shot on April the 15th, 1931, whilst eating in a restaurant on Coney Island. Masseria was found with an ace of spades in his hand, which is traditionally known as the card of death in the gang world. And if you don't want us to give you the ace of spades, please subscribe and like this video immediately. Luciano then tries to make peace with Maranzano, even though he does not appreciate his aggressive ways. But the latter is not willing to accept Lucky's alliance because he considers him dangerous and distrusts his non-Sicilian men, including Genovese. Maranzano decides to kill both Vito and Luciano, and so goes on to hire the killer Vincent Mad Dog Cole, an Irish killer, to eliminate them both. His plan, however, backfires because it's the other two who take him out first, relying on 4 Jewish killers who show up at Maranzano's office disguised as IRS agents. Now, various sources do suggest instead that it was the gangster Meyer Lansky who hired the killers instead of the 2 Italian gangsters. So the death of Maranzano, however, allows Lucky Luciano to become the new boss and Genovese to become his deputy. Now, in these years, Don Vitone becomes one of the most powerful gangsters in New York. The golden age for the two, however, does not last long because in 1936, Luciano is arrested and sentenced to 30 years in prison. And the following year, Genovese becomes a fugitive for having organised the murder of the gangster Ferdinand Fred Boccia. Vito escapes to Italy and hides in Nola. In Italy, Genovese, of course, can't help but not stop his criminal activity and takes advantage of the political situation to increase his own power once again. In fact, he immediately becomes a supporter of Mussolini and of the fascist top dogs, and it's thought that he had been the supplier of cocaine to the Duce's son-in-law, Galeazzo Ciano. Don Vitone is committed to his campaign of support by building a Casa del Fascio in Nola. Now, the Casa del Fascio were nothing if not the local headquarters of the National Fascist Party. Now, during these years, Genovese manages to grow thanks to the black market of food, and in 1943 becomes an aide and interpreter of the American Colonel Poletti, and thanks to him and to other corrupt military authorities, finds no obstacles in the development of its illegal market. His smuggling activities, however, don't quite go unnoticed, and in 1945 he was arrested by the Allied military police. Genovese was brought back to the United States because he was still wanted for the murder of Boccia and was immediately put on trial. The witness who had accused Don Vitone of the murder, however, died mysteriously, and with him, of course, all the other witnesses. The cases are dismissed as suicides, thanks to Genovese's alliances with corrupt police forces. And with the charges dropped, he returns to freedom in 1946. Vito returns to take command of his family, but his power is not without opponents. Costello, in fact, does not seem to accept this return of his, and More factions are formed within the group. In 1958, Don Vitone is arrested once again, and this time he's forced to serve 15 years in the penitentiary of Atlanta. The boss will continue to manage the family through his deputies and will die at the age of 72 in prison of a heart attack. Vito Genovese was one of the top mobsters who were key players in the development of the Italian Mafia in the US during the Prohibition years. His ambition and coldness took him far, and thanks to his alliances and friendships, he managed to create a core of power that endured for many, many years. So there you have it, as we start exploring the fascinating establishment of Italian crime into the dark underworld of the USA. Now, we've loads more videos coming up, so please don't forget to subscribe and keep an eye out for our next video. Until next time, ciao.